All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, in the Western Conference semifinals, the Los Angeles Clippers were able to show the grit that this franchise is unaccustomed to having. I mean, you think about some of the lean years over the decades that the Clippers have had, whether it was in their time as the Buffalo Braves, the San Diego Clippers, and now the Los Angeles Clippers. But gradually things have gotten better over the past couple of years under the ownership of Steve Ballmer. We saw the Clippers have a ton of expectations last year heading into the playoffs, and they faltered as they lost. They blew a 3-1 lead in the Western Conference semis to the Denver Nuggets. This time around, things were a lot different. We saw the Clippers overcome an 0-2 hole in the first round versus the Dallas Mavericks, and that was after the Clippers actually lost the first two contests at home. This time around against the Utah Jazz, we saw the Clippers lose the first two games, but it did have a different feel to it. Um, as the Clippers lost the first two games in Salt Lake City, and then they came back and even it up. But for me, I really think it was a gut check time for this team because they did not have Kawhi Leonard for games 5 and 6. And you know what? When your best players are down, somebody has to step up. And, in games 5 and 6, that guy was Paul George. We saw George get Utah for 37 points in game 5. He turned back around last night and got 28 against the Jazz. But then how about Terrence Mann? This guy stepped up with 39 big points. He set the tone in the second half as the Clippers rallied because, in the first half, the Clippers looked dead in the water. They were playing decent, but you know what? Defensively, they could not stop Utah. Utah had 72 points. They were lighting it up for three. And you know what? The Clippers, they just rallied and they got it going in that third quarter, and they were chipping away. And then Utah would try to, reestablish the lead. But every time that the Jazz attempted to reestablish the lead, the Clippers had another run in them. And then they were able to feed off of the energy from the fans at the Staples Center last night. And, because of that, the next thing you know, by the end of the third quarter, the Clippers were only down by 3 points. And then the fourth quarter really belonged to them. Terrence Mann made big shots throughout the entire night. Paul George stepped his game up, as did the likes of Reggie Jackson, who also had 27 points. But, I really want to talk about Paul George because he has, gotten his fair share of criticism since he came to the Clippers last year. We saw him struggle immensely in the playoff bubble last year. That was a big reason why the Clippers were ousted in the second round by by the Nuggets. And it was a situation, you know what? Paul George became the butt of a lot of jokes on social media. And, he showed flashes this season during the regular season. But you know what? This Clippers team at times, they could frustrate you because they have the talent there, but then they would lose to bad teams. And it led myself to be like, you know what, can this team be trusted? But they've really stepped up. And this is a new day for the Clippers. This is their first ever trip to the Western Conference Finals. So they definitely want to savor it. But you know what? Just getting to the Western Conference Finals and advancing are two different things. So definitely they still have some work ahead of them versus the Phoenix Suns. But you look at this team, they stepped up without Kawhi Leonard for games 5 and 6. Credit to head coach Ty Lue. He was an assistant under Doc Rivers last year. Of course, Doc and the Clippers parted ways. Doc is now with Philly. But nonetheless, you know what? The Clippers do have a new voice in the room. And on top of that, it's on these players. And I saw the Clippers play in the last two games in a fashion that we have really not seen them play with over the years. Because you know what? Those two wins were defined by character. And I say that because when the odds are against you, when you don't have your best guy out there, and you still find a way to go out there and get it done. And I know that Utah defensively was not good in this series because the Clippers, like especially in game 6, the Clippers went to town from 3-point land. But nonetheless, when your best guy is not there and your back is against the wall, you know what? You got to go out there and find a way. And the Clippers did not give up. Like I said, their first trip to the Western Conference semis. And I think for the Clippers and Paul George, they both were able to exercise some demons. I'm going to start with the Clippers first. First and foremost, 50 years as a franchise, and you have never gotten to the conference finals. So that just lets you know what you're dealing with this organization. I mean, you think back to the Clippers' first 25 years or so in Los Angeles. I mean, they were the butt of jokes. This team was consistently getting the first overall pick in the NBA draft. Also, if they got to the playoffs, it was like, wow, the Clippers are actually in the playoffs because they were always the Lakers' little brother. And honestly, they still are the Lakers' little brother because it's a situation where you look at the long-standing success that the Lakers have had both in Los Angeles and previous to that in Minneapolis. The Clippers are not going to be able to overshadow that just like that. It's not happening. So nonetheless, they were able to take a big step last night. And this is all about a culture change. And this, is a credit to Steve Ballmer. He's, establishing a franchise where, there's accountability, but also on top of that, there are expectations. And, he wants to establish his own brand for the Clippers. This is why, the Clippers are probably going to go to Inglewood soon and have their own arena because there's no identity for them playing in the Staples Center as they're sharing that with the Lakers and then, of course, the Los Angeles Kings of the National Hockey League. But with that said, they exercised some demons last night. They're taking a step to a level that they have never been before. And you know what? This is what it's all about when you're creating a new identity. Now people have to take the Clippers more serious because you know what? They did not fold under the pressure. They stepped up when the chips were pushed to the middle of the table. And you know what? That's what good teams do. And in the case of Paul George, you know what? I haven't seen Paul George play this aggressive since his days with Indiana. And he said, you know what? This is not going down on my watch. We got to do what we got to do to advance. And of course, it wasn't just him last night. Like I said before, Reggie Jackson stepped up in a big way, as did Terrence Mann. Terrence Mann had the game of his life. And, you want to see for both Paul George and Terrence Mann and Reggie Jackson to try to carry that momentum into the Western Conference Finals versus the Suns. You look at this, and I'm going to talk about the Suns Clippers series, not right now, but that will be coming either tonight or tomorrow in a different podcast, probably tonight, in regards to that series. But you look at it, and now they have an opportunity to try to take advantage if Chris Paul is not there for the Phoenix Suns. But at the same time, they want to go out there and forge this new road for themselves and get to that NBA championship. Getting to the Western Conference Finals is one thing, but the bottom line is this. First and foremost, you don't get a trophy for getting to the Western Conference Finals. You get a trophy for winning the Western Conference Finals. And secondly, as the case with every team that's in the postseason, you want to be that last team standing. 16 teams in the playoffs, 15 teams are going to head home with their last game of the season being a loss. And getting to the conference finals is not a guarantee that you can come back the following season and have bigger and better results. You look at the four teams that made the conference finals last year in the playoff bubble. Only the Nuggets got out of the first round, and the Nuggets were really focused on trying to get back to the Western Conference Finals and even to the NBA Finals. It's not easy, and I know that there was a short turnaround from last year's playoff bubble to this year's regular season, but nonetheless, you can't take these things for granted. So we don't know the availability of Kawhi Leonard for the Western Conference Finals and for the rest of the playoffs. But with that said, you know what? The Clippers have to go out there and play like they're not going to have them. It's a situation. I think they're trying to keep it under lock and key. You're hearing some of the rumors. So this knee injury could be worse than the Clippers and a lot of other people are letting on to it. But nonetheless, this is still a banner day for the Clippers organization. Let's see if they can ride this wave of momentum going forward. They're halfway there as far as winning a championship. It still won't be easy because they've got a dangerous Phoenix team that they have to meet in the Western Conference Finals, and who knows what could happen if the Clippers will get past them into the NBA Finals. But nonetheless, this is a banner day for this organization. This was a huge step in the right direction for the Clippers. And again, I know it's only two playoff series that they've won this year, but when you have an organization that has developed a long term reputation in regards to losing and futility. Steps like these are immense because you are, removing yourself from that losing culture. You are taking the next step, and it's easier said than done. So credit to the Clippers. They exercised some demons. Like I said, Paul George stepped up in a big way. And now let's see if this Clippers club can ride the wave of momentum for the remainder of these NBA playoffs. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for checking this out. And if you like what you saw and heard, please feel free to hit the like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Now, if you are on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There is also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. Take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.